Thank you, Tony. Good evening, LULAC. It's already been said, but at the risk of being repetitious, what an auspicious week for the law and our Constitution. What an auspicious week for the Latino community, and what an auspicious week for this National Convention of LULAC. I want to thank President Moran and Brent Wilkes for giving me the opportunity to say a few words this evening. This auspicious week is not only auspicious for the immigrant community, for the Latino community, but an auspicious week for our entire nation. The week began 4 days ago with that historic 5-3 decision in Arizona versus United States, in which, as you know, the Supreme Court struck down entirely 3 of the 4 provisions of SB 1070 before the court. And with respect to the 4th, that very troubling provision that would mandate law enforcement to engage in racial profiling in determining whether officers have a reasonable suspicion that someone is undocumented, even that provision in the court's decision has a very, very difficult future before it. We have the opportunity, indeed the obligation, to take advantage of the court's pronouncement, making it clear that there is a narrow, narrow scope for implementation of any such provision. You may have heard in reaction to Monday's historic Supreme Court pronouncement, some of the purveyors of these terrible laws in Arizona and throughout the country declaring a victory. We should make no mistake. When you get a report card from the Supreme Court that has 3 Fs and an incomplete, that is not a victory. In response to their collective and delusional denial, we must acknowledge concern about the future of that 4th provision, but at the same time, we must celebrate this tremendous victory against the forces of intolerance and nativism that have sought to replicate SB 1070 in every state and locality throughout the country. As I said, this is a victory not for the Latino community. It is a victory for the nation, as the justices reaffirmed the long-standing principle that only the federal government has the authority to regulate immigration, as the justices reaffirmed that no state, no matter how dissatisfied it may purport to be, has the right to trample on the rights of its residents, to trample on the constitutional rights of its residents solely for the purpose of challenging the federal government. While this is a victory for the nation, in this room and outside of it, we should acknowledge with pride that it is a victory by the Latino community. For even though the case was titled Arizona versus United States, and it was the federal government that stood before the court and argued that these provisions should be stricken, we know that the federal government, this administration, or any other would never have acted without the constant and consistent pressure of the Latino community in decrying SB 1070 and those who would replicate it elsewhere. It is clear that this auspicious week will be repeated in years to come. With the growth in the size and prominence of the Latino community, more and more, the decisions of the Supreme Court will have a great impact on our community, and we will have a special obligation as the nation's largest minority population to ensure that those decisions, like not just the decision on Monday, but the decision yesterday, come out the right way. We know, and I acknowledge, as someone who's dedicated his life to the law, that the courts are not the solution, that ultimately it is the work of the entire community and our allies in the streets and at the ballot box that will secure for all time the constitutional principles that we in the Latino community are in the unique position of championing and ensuring their endurance. Indeed, if we want to see weeks like this in the future, we have the obligation of ensuring that those in both parties understand how critically important it is that we have justices and judges who appreciate the struggles of everyday Americans, that we have justices and judges who understand the common humanity, the common belief in core values that binds us all together as a nation, regardless of race, regardless of language, regardless of immigration status. That if we want judges and justices who understand the critical importance of being true and faithful to the constitutional principles that underlay the decisions this week and that underlay our common purpose in this nation, we must ensure, as the nation's largest minority community, that politicians and leaders from both parties know that this is our baseline expectation, that we expect to see judges and justices with such an appreciation continually and consistently appointed and confirmed to sit on courts throughout the country. In closing, I want to mention one case that we already know will present an opportunity again for our community to deliver a victory to the entire nation. As I am sure many of you are aware, the Supreme Court has already indicated that it will, a mere 9 years after the Michigan cases, revisit the issue of affirmative action, this time in hearing a case out of Texas, the birthplace of both LULAC and MALDEF. In Fisher versus University of Texas, the court will again consider whether it is appropriate and constitutional for our universities to consider race among other factors in determining who most merits representation in our most prestigious institutions of higher education. Now, regrettably, the foundation upon which we must build is one that acknowledges only diversity, and specifically the achievement of a critical mass of each minority group as a basis for affirmative action. It is our task in the Latino community to make those justices that will consider this decision all the more aware of how critically important we in the Latino community consider equal educational opportunity and the consideration of affirmative action in the continued absence of attention to the bias and discriminatory effects that inhere in the criteria that are used to admit students to the University of Texas and every other prestigious higher education institute throughout the country. We have more to do. With the victory and opportunity of this week comes obligation. And our obligation is through our work as a collective community throughout the nation, in the streets, in the courts, and at the ballot box, to ensure that our leaders today and in the future, including those leaders who don robes and make critical decisions in Washington, D.C., understand that for this community, continued faithfulness to our core constitutional and shared values means that we will expect a decision upholding affirmative action, means that we will expect a decision following this Monday's opinion that will prevent the show me your papers provision from ever being implemented, means that we expect a continued repetition of this auspicious week in every year to come, with more and more victories for the values that the Latino community holds so dear. And I know that in that endeavor, whether in court, in the streets, or at the ballot box, our partner and friend, all of you at LULAC, will be in the lead. Thank you.